The laughter in the stars. In the center of the Orion Arm, the Great Coalition Senate floated above a shining blue world. Hundreds of species were part of the coalition. Some were old. Some were powerful. All believed they understood strength. On the main screen of the Senate chamber, a small yellow star appeared. Sol. Around it were a few planets, some gas giants, and one blue world that held humanity. A tall delegate named Rax spoke first. His voice echoed across the chamber. Earth has refused coalition membership again, he said. They decline our protection and our authority. A few senators made low sounds of amusement. They are divided, another delegate added. Their history is full of war with themselves. They have only recently reached interstellar travel. Primitive, someone said quietly. On the screen, Earth rotated slowly. Clouds moved gently across its surface. Rax folded his hands behind his back. They believe they are independent, he continued. They claim they prefer to remain neutral. Neutral? A senator laughed. There is no neutrality in a galaxy ruled by power. More laughter filled the chamber. To the coalition, strength meant fleets. It meant visible warships, shining and massive. It meant borders drawn by force. Earth had none of those. Coalition probes had scanned the solar system many times. They saw mining stations in the asteroid belt. They saw shipyards near Mars. They saw research platforms orbiting Jupiter. Nothing impressive. Nothing threatening. No grand fleet. No giant battle stations. Just quiet industry. They mistake our patience for weakness, Rax said calmly. Perhaps it is time to correct that misunderstanding. The chamber grew still. What do you propose? Asked the High Speaker. A limited show of force, Rax replied. A diplomatic fleet. Enough ships to demonstrate superiority. They will accept membership once they understand their position. And if they refuse? The High Speaker asked. Rax allowed himself a small smile. They will not refuse. The vote passed quickly. A coalition fleet was assembled within days. At the edge of the solar system, deep space was calm. Human observatories detected the incoming fleet long before it arrived. In an underground command center beneath Earth's surface, leaders gathered around a large holographic display. Dozens of coalition warships appeared as bright red markers moving toward Sol. A general named Mark stood quietly, with folded arms. They're not hiding, he said. A scientist beside him nodded. They want to be seen. On the screen, data flowed steadily. Ship classifications, weapon estimates, power readings. The fleet was strong. More than enough to defeat any visible human defenses. A younger officer looked uneasy. Should we mobilize? He asked. Mark shook his head slowly. No. Sir? We stay quiet. The room fell silent. Above them, Earth continued its normal rotation. Cities glowed at night. People lived their lives without panic. There were no emergency broadcasts. No evacuation orders. No visible military buildup. In orbit, human ships continued routine patrols as if nothing had changed. Days later, the coalition fleet crossed the outer boundary of the solar system. Their ships were large and angular, built for intimidation. Energy shields shimmered faintly around them. Weapons arrays were charged but inactive. On the bridge of the lead coalition cruiser, Rax stood confidently. Any response from Earth? He asked. None, an officer replied. Their communications remain civilian. No fleet movements detected. Rax gave a small laugh. They understand. The fleet advanced toward Mars orbit. Coalition ships scanned everything. Asteroids, mining platforms, transport vessels. Nothing moved to intercept them. Nothing formed battle lines. One officer frowned at his console. Energy readings from the asteroid belt are unusual. Rax turned slightly. In what way? Large mass concentrations. Deep structures. Hard to map. Mining, Rax said dismissively. Primitive resource extraction. The officer hesitated, but said nothing more. The fleet slowed near Mars. Still no response. Rax opened a transmission channel to Earth. This is Coalition Diplomatic Fleet 1. We request immediate dialogue with planetary leadership. There was a short pause. Then a calm human voice answered. This is Earth Command. We are aware of your presence. Rax smiled. Excellent. We will begin negotiations shortly. The human voice continued. You have crossed into restricted defense territory. The smile faded slightly. Defense territory? Rax repeated. We have detected no defensive perimeter. There was another pause. Then the human voice spoke again. You will. The transmission ended. On the Coalition bridge, confusion spread. Before anyone could speak again, space itself seemed to tremble. Deep in the asteroid belt, something massive shifted. Not a ship. Not a station. Something far larger. Rax stared at the sensor display as one of the asteroids changed orbit. Its trajectory adjusted smoothly. Controlled. Intentional. Then another object moved. And another. The officer's voice shook slightly. Sir, those are not mining structures. Across the solar system, enormous celestial bodies began to align. And for the first time since entering Sol, the Coalition fleet stopped laughing. The first disappearance. The Coalition fleet drifted near Mars, engines glowing softly against the dark. On the bridge of the lead cruiser, Rax stared at the sensor display. Several large objects in the asteroid belt were no longer following natural orbits. They are adjusting position, the navigation officer said quietly. Mining platforms do not adjust position like that, another officer added. Rax felt a small crack in his confidence, but he did not show it. Maintain formation, he ordered. Scan those objects at maximum resolution. Long-range scanners pushed deep into the asteroid belt. The readings came back strange. Solid mass. Layered internal structure. Energy signatures buried far beneath the surface. One officer swallowed. Sir, these are not hollow rocks. Before Rax could respond, one of the Coalition destroyers at the edge of the formation reported an alert. Unknown gravitational distortion detected. On the main screen, space around the destroyer shimmered. It was subtle at first, like heat rising from a desert road. Then the distortion grew stronger. Shields at full, the destroyer captain shouted over the comm. No weapon fired. No beam struck. There was no explosion. The distortion tightened around the ship like invisible hands. And then, the destroyer vanished.
Gone.
No debris. No signal. No energy spike. Just empty space where a warship had been. Silence fell across the Coalition fleet. Rax stared at the blank spot on the display. Report, he demanded. No debris field, sensors replied. No warp signature. No radiation. The ship was simply not there anymore. One of the officers whispered, Did they destroy it? Rax shook his head slowly. There was no discharge. Another distortion appeared, this time around a smaller escort ship. Pull back, Rax ordered. But it was too late. The second ship shimmered and disappeared just like the first. Panic began spreading through the fleet. They are targeting us. We cannot detect the source. Energy readings rising from the asteroid belt. Rax finally understood. Those moving asteroids were not rocks. They were something else. Something massive. On the display, one of the largest objects in the belt rotated slowly. Its surface shifted. Long lines opened across it like deep cracks. But they were not cracks. They were doors. Massive armored plates slid apart. Beneath them, rows of structures extended outward. Weapons. Each one the size of a city. Rax felt the bridge grow cold. That is not possible, he said under his breath. The object was as large as a small moon. And it was moving under power. On Earth, inside the underground command center, General Mark watched the same display. 2 hostile vessels contained, a technician reported. Continue controlled response, Mark said calmly. The scientist beside him adjusted a hologram. Their fleet is attempting retreat maneuvers. Let them move, Mark replied, but hold perimeter. Across the solar system, more massive bodies shifted position. A dwarf planet near the outer belt adjusted its orbit slightly. Thrusters ignited beneath its crust, invisible from distance, but powerful enough to move a world. Earth had not built fleets of thousands. Earth had built a handful of giants. And they were waking up. Back in coalition space, confusion turned into fear. "Sir," gravitational distortions forming around multiple ships, an officer shouted. "Spread out," Rax ordered. "Increase distance between vessels." But the distortions did not care about distance. Each one formed precisely around a single target. Another cruiser vanished. Then a frigate. No explosions. No wreckage. Just absence. The fleet's communications filled with frantic voices. "We are being erased. Where are they going?" Rax slammed his fist against the console. "Stabilize formation. Identify the mechanism." An officer finally shouted the answer. "The distortions are coming from those massive objects. They are manipulating localized spacetime." Rax stared at the giant body in the asteroid belt. It had fully awakened now. Engine flares glowed faintly along its surface. It was not a station. It was not a planet. It was a warship. A warship the size of a world. A transmission came from Earth. The same calm human voice from before. "You were warned." Rax opened the channel instantly. "What have you done to our ships?" "They are contained," the voice replied. "Contained where?" "In controlled spatial fields. You are attacking a diplomatic fleet. You crossed into restricted territory with armed vessels." Rax's jaw tightened. "You are declaring war." "No," the voice answered softly. "We are demonstrating boundaries." Another coalition ship shimmered and vanished. Rax felt the truth settle heavily inside him. This was not an attack. This was control. Earth was not firing weapons wildly. Earth was selecting targets calmly and removing them from the battlefield. The remaining fleet began retreating at full speed. Engines flared bright as they tried to escape deeper into space. For a moment it seemed to work. No new distortions formed. The giant objects in the belt held position. Watching. Waiting. Rax ordered full withdrawal from the solar system. The coalition ships turned and accelerated away from Sol. Behind them, the massive celestial warships slowly realigned into silent formation. From a distance, they looked like ordinary rocks again. Quiet. Unmoving. But Rax knew the truth now. Earth had not built bigger ships. Earth had built fewer ones. Ones that could swallow fleets without firing a single visible shot. And the laughter that once filled the coalition senate had disappeared completely. The hidden giants revealed. The coalition fleet retreated from the solar system in silence. No one spoke on the main bridge of Rax's cruiser. The stars outside looked the same as always, cold and distant. But something had changed. They had entered Sol with confidence. They were leaving with fear. Behind them, near the asteroid belt, the massive object slowly closed its surface plates. From a distance, it once again looked like a simple dwarf planet. But every officer on that bridge now understood. It was not a planet. It was a weapon. Inside the Coalition Senate chamber, emergency sessions began immediately. Footage from the fleet played across the central display. The moment the destroyer vanished, the shimmering distortion, the enormous celestial body rotating under power. Gasps echoed through the chamber. "That is impossible," one senator whispered. "No species constructs warships at planetary scale," another said. Rax stood before them, calm but shaken. "They do," he replied quietly. "And they have." A senator leaned forward. "How many of these objects exist?" Rax hesitated. "At least several. Possibly more hidden beyond our scans." Silence fell. The coalition had always measured power in fleet numbers. Thousands of ships. Millions of soldiers. But Earth had changed the equation. They did not build more ships. They built bigger ones. Far bigger. On Earth, world leaders addressed the public in a controlled broadcast. There was no panic. No celebration. A man named David, the spokesperson for Earth Command, stood before a simple background of the planet. For decades, he began, humanity invested in long-term defense. He did not mention fear. He did not mention enemies. He spoke calmly. "We chose not to compete in fleet numbers. We chose resilience. Images appeared behind him. Old mining colonies in the asteroid belt. Large-scale excavation projects near dwarf planets. Massive industrial structures hidden inside rocky surfaces. These were not only mining operations, David continued. They were construction sites. The screen shifted to a cross-section of one of the giant bodies. Beneath layers of natural rock were vast internal chambers. Engines the size of oceans. Shield generators stretching across entire continents. Weapon systems built into the crust. These structures were built slowly, David said. Over generations. Quietly.
He paused.
We call them Guardians. Deep in the asteroid belt, one of the Guardians drifted in silent orbit. Its outer surface was rough and natural-looking. Scars of old meteor impacts covered it. But far beneath that crust, a core of glowing energy pulsed steadily. Inside, control centers stretched for kilometers. Artificial gravity held steady. Human crews worked calmly at massive stations. Captain Elias stood at the central command platform. Coalition fleet fully exited Sol space, an officer reported. Good, Elias said. He looked at the internal display of the Guardian systems. Everything was stable. The containment fields that had swallowed Coalition ships were still active, holding the captured vessels in suspended spatial pockets. They were not destroyed. They were simply stored. Elias turned to his tactical officer. No pursuit. Yes, Captain. Earth had no interest in chasing. The message had been delivered. Back in Coalition territory, scientists worked non-stop analyzing the battle data. The distortion fields did not destroy the ships, one researcher explained to the Senate. They folded localized space around them. Meaning, a senator demanded. They were removed from our observable dimension. The chamber stirred with unease. Can we replicate this? Someone asked. The scientist shook his head. Not at that scale. The energy required is beyond our current output. And the size of the platform required? Another asked. The scientist brought up an image of the Guardian. At minimum moon-sized. Shock rippled through the room again. Earth had turned entire celestial bodies into engines of war. Meanwhile, in the outer regions of the solar system, more objects quietly shifted. Near Jupiter, one of its smaller moons emitted a faint glow from beneath its surface. Far beyond Neptune, a distant icy body adjusted its orbit slightly. Hidden. Waiting. The Coalition had only seen one Guardian awaken. They had not seen the others. Earth Command held a private meeting underground. General Mark stood before a holographic map of Sol. Phase 1 complete, he said. A scientist asked, Do we reveal everything? Mark shook his head.
No.
Only what they've already seen. They'll investigate. Let them. Earth had prepared for centuries. The Guardians were not rushed projects. They were built slowly, carefully, hidden beneath the cover of normal industry. Mining reports disguised excavation. Energy research masked reactor construction. Even space traffic had been structured to look ordinary. Humanity had learned from its own history. Visible weapons invite escalation. Hidden strength prevents it. In distant star systems, rumors began spreading quickly. Earth controls moving planets. They erased ships without firing. They built warships larger than moons. Fear mixed with fascination. Some civilizations began upgrading their defenses. Others opened quiet diplomatic channels toward Sol. Rax watched these developments carefully. He no longer felt anger. He felt understanding. Earth had never tried to impress the galaxy. They had never displayed power for pride. They had built in silence. And when mocked, they responded once. Precisely. Decisively. As the stars drifted slowly outside his ship's viewport, Rax realized something important. The Coalition had believed Earth was small because its fleets were small. They had laughed at quiet industry. They had mistaken patience for weakness. But now the truth was clear. Earth had not built ships to match the galaxy. Earth had built worlds that could rise. And only one of them had awakened. That thought stayed with him long after the fleet reached home. If one Guardian could erase ships so easily, what would happen if all of them moved at once? When the worlds began to move, the Coalition Senate did not sleep. Across their capital world, lights remained on through the night. Scientists, generals, and politicians gathered in emergency rooms filled with holographic displays. At the center of every screen was the same image.
Sol.
And the massive object that had swallowed their ships. Rax stood before the Senate once again. "We believed we faced a small species with limited reach," he said calmly. "We were wrong." A senator slammed a hand against the table. "How many of these guardians exist?" Rax did not guess. "We do not know." That uncertainty was worse than any number. Far away, inside the solar system, silence returned. The coalition fleet had retreated. Trade routes near Mars resumed normal traffic. Civilian ships continued their work. From a distance, nothing looked different. But deep inside the asteroid belt, something had changed. The first Guardian rotated slowly in space. Captain Elias stood at the main observation deck, watching stars slide across the massive window. "System readiness?" he asked. "Full operational," an officer replied. "Primary engine stable. Shield grid aligned." Elias nodded. "Begin formation shift." Deep inside the planet-sized structure, engines the size of mountain ranges activated. From outside, there was no explosion, no bright flare. The entire celestial body simply adjusted. It changed orbit with smooth precision, like a ship turning in water. Only this ship was hundreds of kilometers wide. Coalition deep space probes watching Sol sent urgent data back home. Massive object altering orbit. Confirmed artificial propulsion. Trajectory change not consistent with gravity drift. The Senate chamber grew tense again. "They are repositioning," a scientist said. "For attack," a general asked. Rax shook his head slowly.
No.
"They are showing us." Near Jupiter, one of its outer moons trembled slightly. Beneath its frozen crust, reactors that had been silent for years began to hum. Panels along its surface opened like slow-moving tectonic plates. Hidden thrusters ignited. The moon adjusted its path by a fraction.
Small.
But controlled. Across the solar system, another object responded. Beyond Neptune, a distant icy dwarf planet emitted a faint blue glow from deep within its core. Coalition sensors struggled to process the information. Multiple large bodies showing artificial energy output. "How many?" a senator demanded. "3 confirmed, possibly more." The room fell into heavy silence. Earth had not built one giant warship. They had built several. And they were waking up. Inside Earth Command, General Mark stood with folded arms. "Guardian 2 aligned," a technician reported. "Guardian 3 adjusting outer defense ring." Mark studied the holographic map. Massive icons representing each Guardian slowly moved into new positions. They formed a wide arc across the inner solar system, a defensive wall of moving worlds. "We are not escalating?" a political advisor asked. Mark shook his head. "We are stabilizing." He looked at the display carefully. "If they return with force, we must be ready." In coalition space, military analysts ran simulations at maximum speed. "What happens if they advance beyond Sol?" one general asked. The simulation displayed a Guardian entering coalition territory. Results appeared seconds later. Total fleet loss, 94%. Planetary shields, overwhelmed. Orbital defenses, ineffective. The general stared at the numbers. "Run it again." The results did not change. The Guardian's mass alone gave it power beyond ordinary ships. Its gravitational manipulation could disrupt entire formations before a single weapon fired. And if it carried weapons the size of continents, the thought was too large to fully grasp. Back in Sol, Captain Elias received new orders. "Guardian 1 will move to forward defensive orbit," his communications officer said. Elias nodded. "Engage primary drift engines." Deep inside the massive structure, the main propulsion system activated fully. From Earth's surface, telescopes observed the distant dwarf planet shifting more noticeably now. News outlets reported calmly. Orbital adjustment of outer industrial body. There was no panic. Humans had known about the Guardians for years. They were not secret to Earth. They were only secret to everyone else. In the Senate chamber, Rax watched live footage as one of the Guardians completed its movement. It now sat between Mars and the asteroid belt, a silent giant, waiting. "They are building a wall," one senator whispered. "Yes," Rax replied softly. "A wall made of planets." He felt no desire for revenge now, only caution. The coalition had mocked Earth. They had laughed at its lack of visible fleets. Now they understood something terrifying. Earth did not need fleets. Each Guardian was worth thousands of ships, and they were nearly indestructible. Hours later, Earth sent another transmission. The same calm human voice. "Our defensive assets have repositioned. We will not pursue your fleet. We will not enter your territory." The message paused briefly. "But if attacked again, all Guardians will activate." The screen showed a brief hologram. 7 massive objects marked within the solar system. 7. The Senate chamber erupted in uneasy murmurs. They had only seen 3. There were 7. Rax closed his eyes for a moment. "They were never weak," he said quietly. "They were waiting." And far away, beneath the quiet glow of the sun, the planet-sized warships held their new positions.
Still. Silent.
But fully awake. The first planet fires. The coalition could not accept what they had seen. 7 planet-sized warships. 7 moving worlds. It was too much power for one system to hold. Inside the coalition military command, generals argued late into the night. "If we do nothing, they will grow stronger," one said. "They have not attacked," another replied. "They erased our ships." "They contained them," a scientist corrected. There was no destruction. The word "contain" did not make the loss feel smaller. Finally, a decision was made. A limited strike. Not a full invasion. Just a test. If the Guardians were truly unstoppable, they needed proof. If there was weakness, they would find it. A fast coalition battleship group jumped to the edge of Sol space. They stayed outside the main defensive arc. Long-range weapons powered up. Their target was Guardian 1, the dwarf planet that had first swallowed their destroyers. On the battleship bridge, the captain gave the order. "Fire." A beam of concentrated energy streaked across space. It crossed millions of kilometers in seconds. From Earth's surface, telescopes recorded the incoming strike. Inside Guardian 1, alarms sounded softly. "Impact in 3 seconds," an officer reported. Captain Elias stood calmly. "Raise primary shield layer." Across the surface of the planet-sized warship, a faint shimmer appeared, barely visible. The coalition beam struck. For a moment, space flashed white. Shockwaves rippled outward. Asteroids nearby drifted slightly from the force. When the light faded, Guardian 1 remained in position. Its surface showed no damage. No cracks. No burning scars. Just silence. Inside the coalition battleship, officers stared at their readings. "Direct hit confirmed," the weapons officer said. "Energy output at maximum." The captain leaned forward. "Damage." A long pause. None detected. The word felt unreal.
None.
Inside Guardian 1, Captain Elias looked at the damage screen. "Shield absorption at 92%, the tactical officer said. "Structural impact negligible." Elias nodded once. "Prepare response." On the outer surface of the massive world, long armored plates began to slide apart. From deep within the crust, a weapon array slowly rose.
It was not a small cannon.
It stretched across an entire continent-sized section of the Guardian. Energy gathered along its core, bright and steady. Back on the coalition bridge, sensors screamed warnings. Massive energy buildup detected. Source confirmed. Guardian 1. The captain's voice shook slightly. "Evasive maneuvers. Full power." "But how do you evade a planet?" Guardian 1 fired. There was no explosive flash. No dramatic burst of color. Just a focused beam of white energy that cut cleanly through space. It struck the coalition lead battleship. For 1 second, the ship glowed brighter than a star. Then it was gone. Not broken. Not drifting in pieces.
Gone.
The beam passed through empty space beyond, fading into darkness. Silence filled the remaining coalition ships. One battleship had been erased in a single shot. Inside Earth Command, General Mark watched the live feed. One hostile capital ship destroyed, the technician reported. Mark exhaled slowly. They fired first, he said quietly. The room remained calm. There was no cheering, no celebration, only confirmation. The Guardians were not only defensive tools. They were weapons. And they worked. The remaining coalition ships did not fire again. They turned immediately and engaged emergency jump drives. Within seconds, they vanished from Sol's Edge. Retreat. Across the galaxy, military observers received the battle data. A single planetary-scale weapon had destroyed a battleship instantly. No shield could withstand it. No maneuver had avoided it. Simulations ran again in Coalition Command. The outcome was clear. If all 7 Guardians fired together, entire fleets would disappear. In the Senate chamber, no one laughed now. The footage replayed again and again. The beam, the flash, the absence. Rax stood silently.
They warned us, he said.
A senator looked at him. Is this war? Rax shook his head slowly.
No.
He turned to face the chamber. This is a line. Back in Sol, Guardian 1 slowly closed its surface plates. The massive weapon disappeared beneath layers of rock and armor. From a distance, it once again looked like a simple dwarf planet drifting peacefully. The other 6 Guardians held position, silent and unmoving. Earth sent a short transmission across open space. You engaged our defensive asset. The response was proportional. No anger, no threat, just fact. If you fire again, further response will follow. The message ended. On Earth, people watched the news calmly. They had known about the Guardians for years. They understood why they existed. Humanity had learned from its own past. Visible strength invites challenge. Hidden strength prevents it. The Coalition had mocked Earth once. They had sent fleets. They had fired first. Now they understood. The solar system was not protected by ships. It was protected by moving worlds. And when one of those worlds fired, it did not miss. As Guardian 1 continued its quiet orbit around the sun, one truth settled across the galaxy. Humanity had not built planet-sized warships to conquer. They built them so no one would ever try to conquer them again. Fear across the galaxy. The destruction of the Coalition battleship changed everything. The footage spread across the galaxy within hours. Every major government saw it. The beam, the flash, the empty space where a massive warship had once existed. There was no explosion, no debris field, just silence. And silence was more frightening than fire. Inside the Coalition Senate chamber, the atmosphere was heavy. No one argued loudly anymore. No one laughed. On the central display, Guardian 1 rotated slowly around the sun, calm and unmoving. Rax stood before the senators again. They fired once, he said. Only once. A senator leaned forward. And destroyed a capital ship. Yes. Can we defend against that weapon? The military advisors exchanged looks. Finally, one answered honestly.
No.
The word felt like a weight in the air. The coalition fleets had ruled their region of space for centuries. They had defeated empires. They had crushed rebellions. But this was different. This was not a fleet. This was a world that could fire. In military research centers, simulations ran without pause. Engineers tested shield upgrades. Scientists studied gravitational manipulation theories. Strategists modeled different attack angles against the Guardians. Every result ended the same way.
Loss.
If they attacked with small fleets, they were erased. If they attacked with large fleets, they were erased more slowly. If they tried long-range bombardment, the Guardians absorbed or redirected the energy. If they attempted to overwhelm with numbers, the mass and power of the planetary warships made numbers meaningless. The solar system itself had become a fortress. Across neutral systems, smaller civilizations watched carefully. Some felt fear. If Earth could build 7 moving worlds, what else could they build? Others felt relief. Earth had not expanded. Earth had not invaded. Earth had not even pursued retreating ships. They had only defended. That difference mattered. Inside Sol, daily life continued. Ships moved between Earth and Mars. Mining stations operated in the asteroid belt. Children went to school under peaceful skies. The Guardians remained in orbit, silent and steady. Captain Elias stood on the observation deck of Guardian 1. He watched the sun burn brightly in the distance. "Coalition fleet activity?" he asked. "Minimal," an officer replied. "No new approach vectors detected." Good. Elias knew the galaxy was watching them now. Every movement, every signal. The Guardians were not only weapons. They were messages. And the message was clear. Do not mistake quiet for weakness. In the Coalition military command, some leaders still wanted retaliation. "We cannot allow this imbalance," one general argued. "If we do nothing, they control us through fear." Rax listened carefully. "They have not threatened us," he said calmly. "They destroyed our ship after we fired first." Silence followed. Pride had brought them to Sol. Pride had cost them ships. Now pride threatened to cost more. Meanwhile, Earth Command held its own meeting underground. General Mark stood before the holographic map of the solar system. All 7 Guardians glowed softly in defensive positions. "Public reaction?" he asked. "Stable," a communications officer answered. "Global approval remains high." Mark nodded. "We will not escalate." A scientist looked concerned. "What if the Coalition attempts a full invasion?" Mark's expression did not change. "Then the Guardians leave orbit." The room became very quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. The Guardians were not fixed stations. They could move. They could travel between stars. If even one entered Coalition territory, the balance of power would shift forever. Rumors began spreading through the galaxy. They can move planets between systems. They can reshape gravity fields. They can bend space itself. Some rumors were exaggerated. Some were not. But one truth remained certain. No one had ever seen weapons at that scale before. Not even ancient civilizations. In a distant neutral system, a small government sent a private message to Earth. "We request diplomatic communication." Soon after, another followed. Then another. Systems that once ignored humanity now sought conversation. They were not begging. They were being careful. Power demanded respect. And respect could turn into alliance. Rax watched these developments with thoughtful eyes. Earth was not using its power aggressively. It was using it quietly. That was more dangerous in some ways. If they had declared war, the Coalition could unite against them. But Earth offered nothing to unite against. Only defense. Only boundaries. Only strength. And strength that remains still is harder to fight than strength that advances. Days later, Earth sent a simple open transmission across known space. "We do not seek expansion. We do not seek control. Our defensive assets will remain within Sol unless attacked again. No threats. No insults. Only clarity." Across the galaxy, leaders listened carefully. The laughter from the first Senate meeting felt like a memory from another age. Humanity had not changed. It had simply revealed what it had been building all along. 7 moving worlds. 7 silent guardians. 7 reminders that patience, when combined with time and determination, could become unstoppable power. And now, for the first time in centuries, the Coalition was not planning an invasion. It was planning caution. Because when planets can rise and fire, war stops being a strategy. It becomes a risk no one wants to take. How Earth learned to wait. Long before the Guardians ever moved, long before the Coalition fleet entered Sol, humanity had faced a difficult truth. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They did not have the largest fleets. They did not control dozens of star systems. They had only one home, one sun, one chance. Inside Earth's early interstellar council, many years ago, leaders had argued about the future. Some wanted expansion. Some wanted alliances. Some wanted weapons. A quiet engineer named Daniel had spoken during one of those early meetings. If we try to match their fleets ship for ship, he said, we will lose. They are older. They have more resources. So, what do you suggest? A politician asked. Daniel answered simply, we stop thinking small. That idea became the beginning. Humanity studied history carefully. Every empire that expanded too quickly eventually collapsed. Every civilization that relied only on fleets faced rebellion or invasion. Ships could be destroyed. Stations could be bombed. But planets? Planets were harder to erase. If Earth could not outnumber the galaxy, it would outscale it. The first project began quietly in the asteroid belt. Officially, it was a mining expansion program. New equipment was sent out. Large drills carved into massive rocks. Cargo ships carried materials back to Mars and Earth. But deep inside selected asteroids, something else was happening. Entire interiors were hollowed out, reinforced, layered with armor. At first, even many workers did not know the full plan. They believed they were building long-term storage hubs, research facilities, energy collectors. Years passed, then decades. Generations of engineers continued the work. The projects grew larger. Eventually, smaller asteroids were no longer enough. Attention shifted to dwarf planets. These bodies had gravity strong enough to support massive internal systems. They had thick crusts that could hide construction from distant scans. And they were common enough to avoid suspicion. Under the name of deep resource development, humanity began reshaping entire worlds. The heart of each Guardian was its core reactor. Unlike standard fusion plants, these reactors were built around gravity manipulation principles. Scientists had discovered a way to bend space in controlled layers. At first, the research had been theoretical, then experimental, finally practical. With enough energy and enough mass, space itself could be shaped. This became the foundation of the containment fields. It became the foundation of the main weapon. And it became the foundation of movement. Because if you could bend space, you could move a world. Construction was slow, painfully slow. But that was the point. Humanity did not rush. They did not announce the projects. They did not build visible fleets to show off strength. They invested in time. Mining reports were published publicly. Trade numbers remained normal. Even when internal chambers stretched hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface, from outside, the dwarf planets looked untouched. Patience became Earth's greatest weapon. Years before the Coalition fleet arrived, the first full Guardian test took place. Deep in the outer solar system, far from public observation, one of the massive structures activated its engines fully for the first time. Inside, Captain Elias, then a young officer, stood on the command platform. Primary drift engine engaged, an engineer reported. The entire world trembled gently. From the outside, the dwarf planet shifted orbit by a fraction. It was enough. They had done it. They had built a planet that could move. Back on Earth, the Council watched the data carefully. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. One leader simply said, "Continue." Over the next decades, 6 more Guardians were completed. Each one slightly improved. Each one capable of independent operation. Each one hidden in plain sight. When the Coalition scanned Sol, they saw mining operations and resource development. They never imagined they were looking at a defensive wall made of worlds. The final step was secrecy. Only a small number of people knew the full scale of the project. Even many military officers believed Earth relied mainly on orbital defenses. The Guardians were Earth's last line. They were not meant to be displayed. They were meant to exist quietly. But when the Coalition mocked Earth, when they entered Sol with armed ships, the waiting ended. Back in the present, Captain Elias stood again inside Guardian 1. He looked at the internal timeline display showing decades of construction history. "We waited a long time," an officer beside him said softly. Elias nodded. "Yes. Do you think they understand now?" He looked out at the distant stars. "They understand that we prepared." He paused. "They may never understand how long we waited." Across the solar system, the 7 Guardians held position. Silent. Steady. They were not symbols of anger. They were symbols of foresight. Humanity had learned something simple from its own past. If you cannot be the biggest fleet, be the hardest target. And when the galaxy finally looked at Sol and stopped laughing, it was not because Earth shouted. It was because the planets answered. The desperate strike. Fear can make powerful nations careful, but it can also make them reckless. Inside the Coalition Military Command, a secret group of generals refused to accept the new balance of power. They believed that if Earth's guardians were allowed to exist without challenge, the Coalition would slowly lose influence across the galaxy. "We must test them properly," one general said.
"We already did," another replied.
"We lost a battleship. That was a direct assault. We need surprise." After days of quiet planning, they created a final attempt. Not a fleet, not a visible approach. A long-range strike. Hundreds of relativistic projectiles. Metal rods accelerated to extreme speed. Invisible. Nearly impossible to detect until impact. They would launch them from far outside Sol. If enough struck at once, even a planet-sized warship might crack. It was a gamble. But fear makes gambles look reasonable. Far from the solar system, hidden Coalition platforms fired the weapons. One by one, the projectiles launched into the dark. No bright engine trails. No loud energy bursts. Just small objects moving close to the speed of light. Their targets were Guardian 1, Guardian 3, and Guardian 5. The generals watched the countdown begin. Impact time, 17 minutes. Inside Earth Command, early warning systems activated immediately. A technician looked up from his station. Multiple high-velocity objects detected. General Mark turned sharply. "Source? Deep space. Not fleet-based. Vector analysis suggests kinetic strike." "How many?" "Hundreds." The room grew quiet. Mark nodded once. So they chose desperation. He turned to the main display. "Activate full gravitational shield net. All Guardians align." Across the solar system, the 7 massive worlds responded. Guardian 1's surface plates shifted slightly. Guardian 3 adjusted its orbit by a small degree. Guardian 5's core reactor brightened. Invisible fields began forming between them. Not shields in the normal sense. Something larger. They bent gravity itself. Space around Sol began to curve gently. The first projectiles entered the outer defensive arc. Coalition Command watched closely. "Impact in 60 seconds, one officer whispered. Inside Guardian 1, Captain Elias stood calm. "Field strength?" he asked. "Rising. 70%. 80. Outside, the first projectile reached the curved region of space. Instead of flying straight toward its target, its path shifted slightly. Then more. The rods began to drift off course. Some curved upward, some downward, some spun away entirely. The Coalition generals stared in disbelief. "They're missing." "No," a scientist said slowly. "They're being redirected." The gravitational field grew stronger. Projectiles bent like light passing near a star. A few still reached close to Guardian 1. When they touched the outer layer of the field, they slowed suddenly, as if time itself resisted them. Then they vanished into containment pockets, captured like insects in amber. Within seconds, the entire strike was neutralized. No impacts. No damage. Just silence. Inside Earth Command, the technician exhaled. All hostile projectiles accounted for. 0 structural loss. General Mark nodded. "Maintain defensive posture. No counterattack." "Sir?" an officer asked. "We defend. We do not chase." In Coalition space, the secret generals watched the results in shock. Every projectile had failed. Not because of armor. Not because of shields. Because space itself had been reshaped. One general sank into his chair. "They control gravity on a system scale." Another whispered, "That is not a fleet defense. That is stellar engineering." Rax entered the command chamber moments later, having been informed of the unauthorized strike. "You launched this?" he asked calmly. No one answered. "You risked total war," he continued. "We had to know," one general argued. "And now you know," Rax replied. He looked at the display of redirected projectiles drifting harmlessly into deep space. They can defend without firing. Across the galaxy, sensors picked up the strange gravitational ripple that had passed through Sol. Scientists studied it carefully. The conclusion was simple and terrifying. Earth's guardians were not just large weapons. They worked together. They formed a defensive network across an entire star system. 7 moving worlds acting as one. Inside Guardian 1, Captain Elias received confirmation that the threat had ended. No retaliation order, his officer said. Elias nodded. They wanted to see if we would strike back. And we won't. Not unless they enter our space again. He looked at the distant sun glowing peacefully. Defense is stronger when it stays defense. Hours later, Earth sent another comm transmission. Your long-range attack has been intercepted. Further attempts will be treated as direct aggression. No insults. No anger. Just certainty. This time, the Coalition Senate did not argue. The reckless generals were removed quietly from command. Because now it was undeniable. Earth did not rely on hope. Earth did not rely on numbers. Earth had turned its entire star system into a shield. And shields built from moving planets do not break easily. As the Guardians returned to their silent positions, one truth spread across every star nation. You cannot overwhelm a world that bends space itself. And mocking Earth had become the most expensive mistake in Coalition history. The quiet diplomacy. After the failed kinetic strike, the galaxy began to change. For centuries, civilizations had ignored Earth. They assumed it was small, isolated, and weak. They had been wrong. Word spread quickly. Not just to the Guardians, but of how Earth had defended itself without a single fleet. Entire systems discussed it quietly. Some feared, others respected, but all reconsidered how they dealt with humanity. In the Coalition capital, the Senate gathered again. Rax spoke in a low voice, measured and calm. They do not attack unless provoked, he said. And even when they are provoked, they control the engagement entirely. We cannot match them with conventional forces. A general scowled. We have fleets everywhere. Why does one system defeat us so easily? Because it is not one system, Rax replied. It is one sun, one network, one design built to last centuries. And we never noticed it. Another senator leaned forward. So, what do we do now? Do we negotiate?
Submit.
Rax shook his head slowly. We do not submit. We adapt. We respect their boundaries, or we suffer consequences. That is diplomacy in the age of moving worlds. Far from the Coalition, smaller systems began sending messages to Earth. They asked for trade agreements, alliances, and open communication. Some offered technology in exchange for access to Earth's solar system defenses. On Earth, General Mark received these transmissions calmly. He studied them with his advisors.
They want diplomacy, he said.
Not war. A young officer looked confused. Sir, they're offering gifts.
Bribes, almost.
Mark shook his head. Not bribes. Mutual benefit. They see value in coexistence. They also see the consequences if they do not cooperate. The decision was unanimous. Earth would respond carefully. Open communication, yes. Expansion or provocation, no. Captain Elias stood on Guardian 1's observation deck, watching the planets rotate slowly. They are sending envoys, his officer said. Requesting to meet with Earth Command. Good, Elias replied. Let them come. But keep the Guardians ready. Inside the command hub, Earth scientists reviewed every message. They did not respond in haste. Every word was considered. Every offer was weighed. Humanity had learned long ago that patience was stronger than aggression. The galaxy would soon learn another lesson. Sometimes silence and preparation speak louder than weapons. In the Coalition, there was tension. Some leaders wanted retaliation. Others wanted peace. Rax knew which path was wiser. Every civilization we offend now must prepare for destruction, he said privately. Every fleet they move in anger will be neutralized. But if they choose calm, they may survive. It was a new type of strategy, not based on ships, armies, or resources. based on observation, understanding, and the knowledge of immense power held quietly. The envoys arrived in sole orbit aboard small, sleek ships. They approached cautiously. Humanity had no interest in aggression, but the Guardians watched silently. The worlds did not move. They did not fire. They simply existed. David, Earth Command's spokesperson, greeted the coalition and neutral delegates aboard a central station near Earth. "We have no interest in conquest," David said calmly. "We have no desire to expand beyond our borders. But we will defend ourselves. And we will defend our system." The delegates nodded. They had seen the Guardians. They had seen what happened to the battleship. They understood. "You are different," one ambassador said quietly. David smiled faintly. "We are prepared. That is all." As the envoys left, Rax reviewed the recordings. He realized humanity had achieved something few civilizations ever did. They had gained respect through restraint, not violence. "Do you think they will attack again?" a junior officer asked him. Rax shook his head. "Not willingly. They know the cost. And humans are patient. If we do not provoke them, they may never strike." Across the galaxy, the story of Earth spread. A system that could erase fleets, worlds that moved, defense that required no aggression. More civilizations began opening diplomatic channels, trade negotiations, knowledge exchanges. They wanted to learn from Earth without pushing it to anger. Earth remained quiet,
Calm.
observing, waiting. Even the coalition changed its tone. There would be no more reckless strikes, no more mockery. They had seen the future of power, and it was measured, patient, and silent. Back on Guardian 1, Elias watched the stars. "The galaxy has learned to respect us," he said softly. "Do you think they will ever challenge us again?" an officer asked. Elias shook his head slowly. "Some may try. But patience built these worlds. And patience can outlast fleets, pride, and anger. If anyone attacks again, they will learn exactly why humanity waited so long." Outside the massive windows, the sun glowed peacefully. The 7 Guardians remained still, their presence a quiet warning to the galaxy. Silence had never been so loud. The galaxy would never forget it. Humanity did not need to strike to prove power. It only needed to wait. And wait they had done. Shadows across the stars. After the failed strike, the coalition's fleets withdrew to distant sectors, nursing their wounds and bruised pride. But fear does not last forever. It transforms. It mutates. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, whispers began to circulate. They cannot be stopped. They moved planets. They erased ships before we even realized what happened. Every system that had ignored Earth before now reconsidered. But not all leaders were willing to submit quietly. Some saw opportunity in fear. They believed that Earth's patience could be tested, that the Guardians, for all their size, might be vulnerable if approached in a clever way. In a hidden sector near the edge of the Coalition's territory, Admiral Lauren convened a council. "They have no fleet, only these giants," he said, gesturing toward a star map. "We cannot fight them directly, but we can use subterfuge, diversion, deception." A younger officer frowned. "You mean sneak attacks?" "Exactly," Lauren replied. "We will force them to reveal more of their system. We will find weaknesses. There is always a weakness." Rax, observing quietly from another chamber, remained silent. He knew Earth's patience had been built over decades. It was unlikely any trick or ambush would succeed. But some humans, if provoked, could be unpredictable. Meanwhile, Earth remained calm. The Guardians held their positions like silent sentinels, massive worlds circling the sun with precise, almost casual grace. Humanity had learned to wait. They had learned that true power is often invisible until it must act. On Guardian 1, Captain Elias received reports of minor fleet movements at the outer edge of Sol space. "Nothing direct," his officer said. "Just probes, recon drones, and small craft." "Let them watch," Elias replied. "We are not their threat. Their pride is." A holographic map displayed every Guardian. Their positions formed a protective arc across the inner solar system. Even if a fleet approached from a dozen angles, they could not bypass all 7. In the Coalition Senate, discussions became heated. "They will not strike first," one senator argued.
We saw their response.
"It was defensive." "But what if they are lying?" another countered. "What if their defenses are limited in range? What if we can isolate one of these worlds?" Rax's voice was calm but firm. "We cannot gamble on assumptions. Humanity has been patient for centuries. Their waiting is intentional. They do not reveal weakness because weakness does not exist." The senators looked uneasy. For the first time, they realized that Earth was not just another star system. They were a force that had quietly mastered the art of scale. Elsewhere, a group of rogue factions in distant sectors plotted independently. They believed they could exploit the chaos of coalition fear. They sent fast ships toward Sol, hoping to test human defenses on a smaller scale, thinking that if one guardian moved, the others would remain passive. The moment these ships entered the outer solar system, sensors aboard Guardian 2 detected them. Unidentified vessels approaching from Sector 6, an officer reported. Elias studied the holographic display. "Do they pose an immediate threat?" "They are unarmed reconnaissance vessels," the officer said. "Still," Elias replied, "we cannot allow intrusions. Activate the containment fields." In minutes, the rogue ships found themselves trapped in gravity wells far beyond their control. They spun helplessly, unable to move, unable to communicate effectively. Their engines drained, their systems stressed. "They cannot escape," the officer confirmed. "Send a message," Elias ordered. "Direct and clear." A calm transmission projected across the system. "You have entered our borders uninvited. Your actions are considered aggression. Withdraw immediately, or further consequences will follow." The rogue ships transmitted their apology, and within hours, they retreated, shaken and humiliated. Back in the Coalition Senate, Rax displayed the event. "Even small incursions are neutralized," he said. "Earth's guardians do not need to attack. They only need to exist. That is why fear is their ally." One senator leaned forward. "So, they are teaching us patience?" Rax shook his head.
No.
"They are teaching us respect." Across the galaxy, word spread. Stories of rogue fleets neutralized without a single shot, of ships disappearing quietly in the solar system's gravitational web, reached every corner. Some civilizations began sending envoys to Earth, seeking trade and diplomacy. Others simply withdrew, unwilling to challenge a species that could control planets like chess pieces. The galaxy was learning that power does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it waits in silence, in the shadow of ordinary worlds, ready to act when the time is right. On Guardian 1, Elias stood on the observation deck, staring at the distant stars. "The galaxy thinks it can test us," he said quietly. "Will they ever learn?" the officer asked. Elias smiled faintly. "Some will. Some will not. But every attempt teaches them a lesson. Patience, preparation, and silence, those are our weapons. And so far, they are unbeatable." Outside, the sun glowed gently. The massive guardians held their positions, and Earth's patience stretched quietly across the solar system, an invisible force shaping the fate of the galaxy. The shadows of silent worlds had begun to fall across the stars. And no one dared to step too close. The unseen line. The galaxy had grown quiet. Not out of peace. Not out of friendship. Out of caution. Every civilization, every fleet, every government now understood something fundamental. Earth was different. Not because of its people, or its armies, or its wealth, but because of what it had quietly built and prepared over centuries. The 7 Guardians were more than just weapons. They were warnings made solid. Moving worlds, orbiting silently, waiting. And the galaxy had learned that crossing the invisible line around Sol came at a price that no one could afford. Inside the Coalition Senate, debates continued in hushed tones. The humans did not fire first, one senator reminded the council. Their response was proportional, yet they erased a fleet with ease. Another shook her head. "It's more than firepower. It's foresight, strategy. The way they built defenses across decades, hidden unseen. We cannot outmatch that. Rax nodded quietly. They did not need to declare war. They did not need fleets or armies in visible formation. The line was drawn, and no one crossed it without learning the cost. Outside the chambers, fleets in maintenance or in distant patrol routes received orders to remain in holding patterns. No engagements, no provocations. Observation only. On Earth, General Mark reviewed reports from all 7 Guardians. All systems stable, the technician reported. No unusual activity detected beyond normal galactic patrols. Mark exhaled slowly.
Good.
Keep monitoring. No retaliation unless directly attacked. A junior officer asked cautiously, "Sir, what about the coalition? Are they planning another strike?" Mark shook his head. "They've learned caution. That is enough for now. If anyone crosses the line, they will see what patience built over centuries can do." In the outer solar system, Captain Elias stood on Guardian 3's observation deck. "We're holding," he said. "All defenses operational." An officer turned to him. "Do you think anyone will try again?" "Some will," Elias replied. "Humans are patient, but not infinite. And not everyone in the galaxy can resist pride. Some will test the line, but each attempt teaches them the same lesson." Outside, the sun glowed gently. The Guardian's silent orbits created a web of protection across the inner system. It was subtle, invisible to those who didn't know, yet it was absolute. Across neutral star systems, messages arrived from civilizations that had watched the events unfold. "We wish to establish diplomatic relations," one message read. "Your actions are impressive," another said. "We seek cooperation, not conflict." Even systems that had once scoffed at humanity now approached cautiously. Fear had become respect, and respect became a bridge for alliances. On Earth, the leadership studied each message carefully. No hasty agreements. No unnecessary display of power. Diplomacy was deliberate, quiet, and measured. Meanwhile, in distant sectors, rogue factions debated. "We saw what they can do," one commander said grimly. One ship erased in a single shot. Hundreds of projectiles neutralized. Entire fleets deterred without firing. Another whispered, "Maybe we were wrong to underestimate them. Maybe the humans are untouchable." Silence followed. Some factions quietly withdrew, their ambition tempered by fear. Others sent observers, seeking to learn without engaging. The message spread. Humanity did not seek conquest. Humanity demanded respect. Back in Guardian 1, Elias watched the galaxy through sensors and optical arrays.
"They are learning," he said.
"Each move they make, each pause is a lesson. They are learning that Earth's patience is the real weapon." His officer asked, "Do you think they understand fully?" Elias smiled faintly. "They will understand eventually, but some will only learn when it's too late." He turned to the holographic map of the Guardians' positions. 7 massive worlds, silent, still, watching. Their presence alone kept the galaxy cautious. "They cannot see everything," Elias said quietly. "But they see enough to fear crossing the line." On Earth, ordinary people went about their lives. Schools operated, cities thrived, ships moved between planets. The galaxy's attention was elsewhere, but humanity's quiet preparation ensured it was never unguarded. Mark reflected on the lesson the Guardians taught. "Power is not only what you show," he said to his advisors. "It is what you build quietly. It is what you protect. It is patience. It is strategy. And above all, it is the line you refuse anyone to cross." In coalition command centers, generals no longer argued about offensive strategy. "We cannot fight them," one admitted. "Their defenses are system-wide. Their response is unavoidable. Even small incursions fail." Rax nodded silently. "Then we wait. We observe. We respect the line. Humanity is patient, yes, but it is also absolute. And patience backed by power becomes unstoppable." Across the galaxy, civilizations began to understand the simple truth. The line around Sol was invisible but unbreakable. No fleet could pass it unnoticed. No strike could penetrate it. No arrogance could evade it. Earth had not shouted. Earth had not displayed fleets in grand parades. It had built quietly, waited patiently, and drawn its line with certainty. And the galaxy, for the first time in history, realized that humanity's silence was louder than the roar of 1,000 warships. The lesson was clear. Some lines are not crossed, and some worlds are not threatened. The Guardians waited, and the galaxy obeyed. The Guardians' legacy. The galaxy had changed forever. Centuries of silence, patience, and preparation had transformed humanity from an ignored species into a measured force no one could challenge lightly. The Guardians remained in orbit around the sun, massive and still, but their presence was felt far beyond the solar system. Inside Earth Command, General Mark reviewed the latest reports. All systems normal, a technician said. No intrusions. All communications with other civilizations are stable. Mark nodded. Good.
Keep it that way.
Observation, diplomacy, and caution. That is our strength now. He turned to the holographic map showing all 7 Guardians in their precise positions. Each world glowed faintly with energy, silent but ready. We do not seek war, but we cannot allow anyone to misjudge our resolve. Captain Elias stood on Guardian 1's observation deck, watching the distant stars. Do you think they have learned their lesson? He asked his second officer. They will, the officer replied. Every fleet, every government. The galaxy now respects boundaries it once ignored. Elias nodded. Respect is earned, not demanded. And sometimes it is clearer when you do not strike first. Outside, the sun shone. The Guardians held their steady orbits, and the solar system's defenses remained invisible to those who lacked knowledge. Humanity's power was not flashy. It was precise, patient, and absolute. Reports from the Coalition came in sporadically now. They no longer sent fleets to probe Sol space aggressively. Their communications were formal and cautious, seeking alliances and trade rather than dominance. Even rogue factions and distant empires that once mocked Earth now hesitated before acting. The memory of a single battleship erased and hundreds of projectiles neutralized lingered in every strategic mind. One coalition general spoke quietly to his colleagues. They are not violent. They are defensive. But their patience spans decades, perhaps centuries. And when they act, it is decisive. Rax, sitting silently beside him, said nothing. The lesson had been learned. Do not underestimate a patient species. Across neutral systems, envoys continued to arrive. Some sought trade deals, others knowledge, and a few requested limited research collaborations. All approached carefully, conscious of the line drawn around Sol. David, Earth's chief diplomat, reviewed the latest requests. They understand our position, he said to his advisors. They respect our borders. They fear the cost of aggression. And yet, his assistant said, they want to engage. David smiled faintly. Yes. Respect does not mean isolation. It means diplomacy on equal terms. Inside Guardian 3, a young officer asked Elias about the Guardians themselves. Will they ever need to fight again? Elias shook his head. I hope not. The galaxy has learned that some conflicts do not require violence to be won. Patience, preparation, and strategy can secure safety more effectively than any strike. The officer looked out at the distant sun and the Guardians? They are more than weapons, Elias said. They are reminders. Reminders that Earth's line is absolute. That some threats are best stopped before they are even made. And that some lessons cannot be forgotten. Time passed. Generations of humans grew up knowing the galaxy was watching. Schools taught history differently now. The age when humanity built the Guardians became a story of foresight and patience. Do not be reckless, teacher said. Do not underestimate. And always prepare. Silence can be the loudest warning. The Guardians continued to orbit silently. They did not intervene unless required, but their presence shaped the galaxy more than any fleet or army ever could. In the Coalition, fleets now trained for defense and diplomacy, not offense. Generals who had once advocated for reckless strikes were removed quietly. The new understanding was clear. Humanity's patience was a weapon far stronger than any conventional fleet. Across other systems, civilizations began to model their own defensive strategies after Earth's. But none could replicate the decades of careful planning, the patience, or the scale of planetary engineering. Earth had set a standard that could not be matched. One evening, inside Guardian 1, Elias looked at the stars again. "The galaxy has learned to respect the line," he said. "They see the Guardians, and they choose caution. That is power without anger. That is victory without conflict." His officer nodded. "Do you think the lesson will last?" Elias smiled faintly. "Some will always test the line, but others will remember. And that memory will shape the galaxy for centuries." Outside, the 7 Guardians glowed faintly, massive worlds in perfect orbit.
Silent.
Patient. Ready. And so, the legacy of the Guardians was set. Not as conquerors, not as aggressors, but as defenders of their home, masters of patience, and teachers of restraint. The galaxy had learned a simple truth: underestimate humanity at your own risk. Some lines are not crossed. Some worlds are not challenged. And some power waits quietly until it must speak. In the silent orbit of Sol, the Guardians remained. And the stars watched carefully. The galaxy would never forget. Humanity had risen quietly. And it would endure,